Hello, I'm Ann Gritch, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this segment of the Oral History of the Diocese of San Jose. And with me today is Father Tony McGuire. I am delighted that he's here. You will discover as we talk how important he was and is to the history of our diocese. So, Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your background. You grew up in the Archdiocese of San Francisco?
Right, so I grew up in, my mother died when I was 5. I was baptized at St. Cecilia's and started St. Cecilia's School, but then when my mother died, the oldest 3 went to St. Vincent's at San Rafael. So I was raised by German Dominicans, and so I know right from wrong. And then came back to Mission Dolores. My father moved in that area and spent the last 7th and 8th grade in Mission Dolores with the Notre Dame sisters. Okay. As a matter of fact, the sister who was my 8th grade teacher just died a couple of years ago, Sister Barbara.
Oh, all right.
And then went to the minor seminary, was in major seminary, was ordained in 65. And as my first assignment, it was St. Gregory's in San Mateo for 3 years. And the appointments had passed in July when all of a sudden, in the midst of the month of July, I was told to go to Most Holy Trinity in San Jose. That one of the priests had been moved but refused to go to Epiphany. And he was a wonderful, wonderful communicator with the Spanish-speaking and a very creative priest. But that kind of brought everything to a head, and the community went out picketing.
Oh, mercy.
So when I entered Most Holy Trinity Rectory, I went in the back door in short pants and dark glasses. So it began a very difficult year, but I was forced to do the Spanish Mass. Now, I had Spanish in school and did fairly well with it, but I did not know how to speak it. So the Archbishop sent me to Cuernavaca for a month. And then I came back and said the Mass, used to help out with Encuentro Matrimonial and with Cursillos, and was in those times enmeshed in it, but still was lacking. And 2 years later, I went again, and that kind of brought me over the top with Spanish.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, our Monsignor Mike Mitchell was a classmate of yours?
Right, yes.
Any stories you can tell us about him?
Well, the only story that I was trying to... His ministry as a priest was quite varied. So he was a teacher, a pastor, and I think one of the things that he really touched him and, went beyond his head, which he's very good at, was that he was a chaplain in the war in the desert. Yeah. And he used to write back these letters that were so rich and full of his enthusiasm and his sense that he was the right man at the right place. And I think with his haircut, he was the right man for the right place.
And he still has that haircut.
Yes.
That's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about the Spanish Mission Band. That was before we became a diocese, is that right?
Right, and actually it was before I was ordained. So it was a wonderful, I was noticing you have the class of 47 there from the Rets from St. Joseph's College. A good number of them, Garcia, McDonald, McCullough, were part of that. Ron Burke was another. And it was when the Archdiocese was a big 10-county archdiocese, and there was much more agrarian areas. So Archbishop Mitty set up this group that would tend full-time to the Spanish-speaking, particularly to the farm workers. So McDonald was here in San Jose area and made what eventually became Guadalupe Parish his center, but he would go all over the county and say Mass in different camps, and the same was true in parts of Oakland Diocese, in parts of Stockton Diocese. And it was a tremendous service to people who, many of them were very oppressed by the conditions. And so when I was in the seminary sometime, as Archbishop Mitty was declining, one of the chancellors decided to remove that group,
Oh.
and then made the parishes responsible for the work with the Spanish speaking. Now, by the time I got here to San Jose, the numbers of farm workers was way down in the city of San Jose. I think farther south it was still quite strong.
Yeah.
But also by the time I got here, there were a good number of Spanish-speaking priests who were taking over the parishes and ministering to the Spanish-speaking. And we used to gather with Cook Moriarty. Remember, Cook was the pastor at Sacred Heart. And so we had a group called the Chicano Priests. So
Right, yes.
there were only two Chicanos in them, Tony Soto and Ray Flores, who were Franciscans from Guadalupe Parish, and wonderful leaders. And then Jim Casey was there, Jack Isaacs, Rich Garcia, and Jim McEntee. Jim became the head of the group. And I always remember I was the treasurer, and I went with a little bank account one day to the Bank of America, and the lady said, McEntee and McGuire, Chicano priests? What is this? But anyway, it was very alive. I mean, it really was. I was thinking about it like the post-Vatican Church, and the priests were together, and especially dealing with the farm worker movement, the Chicano movement. I remember when they built the Center for the Performing Arts. One guy came to us, Jackie Bauer was his name. He was a big community organizer, and he challenged us to be on the picket line because it was a government program. There was government money involved in it, and they were not hiring any Hispanics. So it was a clear issue, but I always remember sitting in the back of my car saying, hearing my father's voice, who was an Irish sergeant, what are you doing here anyway? Right. So I had to break through that, and even a number of priests. I remember Ray Kenny was on the line with me. Yeah. So, but it helped us move and make that social justice call a part of our reality.
Which was wonderful, because you know, people forget now with Silicon Valley that Santa Clara Valley really was agricultural, the Valley of the Heart's Delight.
Yes, no question.
So now you look at it and you say, I can't believe there were farm workers here.
You're absolutely right, yes.
But there really were.
But I do remember going out once or twice to a couple of camps and saying Mass, but the numbers were quite a bit down even then. Yeah. But it was huge at one time, huge.
I can believe it.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the Centro Pastoral. How did that get started?
Well, when I went to San Jose, there was a group called the Concilio de Cristiandad. It was mainly lay people, and they were really wonderful. They organized the Encuentro Matrimonial for married couples, and the Cursillos. Yes, and the Cursillos. And I would say Tony Soto, the pastor of Guadalupe, really promoted the Cursillo as a way to help the Hispanic go from kind of a traditional Catholicism, functional or ritual Catholicism, to a real commitment to Christ and the church. And it was very successful. And so out of that, a lot of the people formed this kind of overarching community to help deal with the church on that level of movements, and then also responding to social justice issues. Anyway, I was working with them, and then I asked the Archbishop eventually to be full-time in this, and we went away then, a group of sisters and myself, and kind of did some planning. So there was Sister Catalina Bayarda from the Missionary Sisters, Eucharistic Missionaries of Holy Trinity, Sister Sandra Price from Notre Dame, Sister Jacinta Millan from Holy Cross, and then Sarah Segovia, who was a wife of one of the deacons to be. She was the secretary. So when we all got back, we kind of got in conflict with the Concilio, and it disbanded. But anyway, we were able to, like, Sandra took on Comunidades de Base, Catalina was with the Encuentro, and Jacinta was with the young Hispanic adults. So, and then, it kept moving along. Just I was then a lot of the chaplaincy to the Encuentro and Cursillo fell to my lot. And
Was that fun?
It was fun. It was really it was wonderful to see. Now, one of the things which they did here, which I found very impressive, was they would have what they called the clausura. The final mass was taken in one of the parishes. So it became a wonderful gathering of new people hearing adults speaking about their testimony about coming to know Christ and so on. So it was very enriching.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. And then out of that, Tony Soto was also very strong. He had a great vision about the deacon program. So he used to talk about it all the time. So eventually I wrote to Archbishop McGuire and said, we'd like to do this. He said, well, you have to bring it before the priest council. So anyway, I was at the priest council, and it was on the agenda as the last item on the agenda. And the item before was, one of the older priests said, I decree, or I think we should make a resolution that all priests should go to all priests' funerals. So I figured, this is going to be a no-brainer.
Right.
Well, a couple of the young priests got up and said, what kind of thing is this? This is a useless resolution.
Oh, dear.
Why are we wasting our time with this? So then it went back and forth about the priest council. It took about an hour. So I had 10 minutes left. And I put the thing forward, and everybody said, okay. And that was, so here it was, kind of a huge change in the structure of the diocese that was resolved in 10 minutes. So.
Maybe it was good. It was the
Well, it was very good.
Last part of the agenda.
I thought to myself, I was very lucky indeed. Yeah. So then I was at St. Patrick's at the time. So I started out at Most Holy Trinity, and 3 years went to St. Patrick's. And while that was happening, we began the deacon program. And it was really a wonderful, wonderful program. By that I mean men and their wives participated once a week in an evening and once a month all day Saturday. And most of them were very faithful to it, and they really grew together like as a community, and I was very happy to resource them and help them along the way. And so the celebration came on December 12th, 1974 at Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Wow.
So we had almost all of them. There were some that waited for another time to be ordained, but it was really just a wonderful, wonderful ceremony. And there was a priest there, Father Tom Messner, who set it all up. He said so I just had to come. But the hitch was, like, he was Franciscan, and they had these Franciscan albs. So the alb had this like Susie Wong slit in it, and when you put it on over a Franciscan habit, it looks fine. But I just had my pants on, and so I was standing next to Archbishop McGuire.
Oh dear!
And he looked me up and down, and he said, "That's obscene." Well, I said to myself, "No, I gotta forget about that remark and
just concentrate.
Pay attention to the event." But it was really a wonderful community event, and mariachis, and very lively. And
now, so was Deacon Joe Alvarez part of that?
Yes.
And maybe Vicente Perez?
And Vicente, right, yeah. And there's one other in San Mateo who's part of the Archdiocese of San Francisco. Now, how is Joe now? Do you know?
He is going strong. He still has his office at St. John Vianney, and he comes to the deacon retreat every year, and it's just he's amazing.
Well, if I wanted to contact him, I could just call St. John Vianney.
Absolutely, yeah, and he's 98, I think.
Because I'd like to get the three of them together and kind of talk about old
and Vicente would love that.
Yeah, I talked to him about it, because I wasn't remembering the dates. And,
yeah, that's terrific.
So it was one of the highlights. But the other thing was about the Central Pastoral. Like in the summertime, we would invite theologians from Latin America.
Wonderful.
Jesus Garcia, Enrique Dussel.
Oh, the names.
Yeah. Jose Marins. So a lot of it was dealing with comunidades de base, a lot of it liberation theology. And it brought in a lot of the local Spanish priests and sisters who would come. So some were working in San Francisco, some were studying at Berkeley. And so it was a nice gathering. Then we'd usually have like a supper together once in a while.
Convivencia.
Convivencia, right.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is. And very empowering, I would imagine,
Yes.
for our Latino community.
Oh yeah, no, really. Like I say, it was right after the council, and it really was a time of great enthusiasm
And energy.
Energy, right?
That was a
Everybody
wonderful
was
time.
younger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And excited.
Yeah, that's right.
It
Yeah.
was. It was just
Yeah.
wonderful. So now, where were you when the announcement was made in January of 1981 that we were going to become a diocese?
Well,
were
I
you
had
still
moved
down
back.
here?
No, I had moved back to San Francisco. Archbishop Quinn came and in 1977 invited me to work with the Centro in San Francisco, and then asked Rich Garcia to be in charge of the Centro in San Jose.
Now,
Yeah.
how did Ana Maria Pineda get involved?
Well, so then after it became a diocese, Bishop Pierre invited Gloria Loya to be in charge, and she invited Ana Maria. And then Rich was kind of the chaplain, but the coordinator was Gloria. And one of the things that, in terms of the diocese, I don't take great credit for this, but I take a little credit. The Archbishop Jadot came to the Senate of the Priests of San Francisco one time. Yeah, but it was a huge thing. And I thought to myself, it's going to be crowded. So I got there early. Not many priests showed up except the senators.
Silly them.
I was there, yeah. I mean, this was most unusual.
Oh, and Archbishop Jadot. I mean, he's a hero.
Yeah, that he would come to, engage with the Senate.
It's fabulous.
So anyway, there was a classmate of mine, Jack Panepsky, he was head of the priest council, and at the end of the meeting, I was there, and they said, anybody else have anything to say? And I said, well, I'm a priest living in San Jose, and every time there's an issue that's has to be dealt with by the church, it's the president of Santa Clara who gives the church's position. So I said, the Archbishop of San Francisco is just so distant, so removed. It's not an effective position anymore. San Jose should be a diocese.
Did you really?
I did, yeah. And I said so when you go to Rome, what I want you to sing is, do you know the way to San Jose? Anyway,
That's great.
so Jack Panevsky told me that the only thing he wrote down was San Jose. Now, again, I'm sure there was much more about it than that, but it was kind of a nice story.
Oh, I love it. It's a wonderful story.
Yeah.
So were you just feeling like, hooray for me when the announcement
Oh,
came
yeah,
out?
so I was delighted, yeah. I mean, I came to the opening. They had it at the
Center for the Performing Arts?
Center for Performing Arts.
And it was pouring rain then.
Yes, yes. But it was a great event. It really
was.
was. And I remember Father Kevin Joyce was leading the music of the day, and yeah, it was delight. And one of the things I always admired about Pierre, first of all, he was very bright. I mean, now he may stumble along the way like everybody does, but he really put forward the role of women,
Yes, he
which
did.
I thought was a wonderful thing in those times because it kind of led away. And
Oh yeah. To this day, the women of the diocese are very grateful to,
I'm sure.
and to Bishop PJ who continued it.
Yeah.
You know, we were very grateful because that was not PJ's inclination
Yes.
or formation, but he right in. So it was wonderful. I will tell you a fun story about the Bishop Pierre. There was an issue about altar girls in the diocese. And he was very wise. He said to the pastors, if you have altar girls, keep them. If you don't bring any in until we find out what Rome says, because it was an issue in Rome. Well, apparently it came out grudgingly that yes, there could be altar girls. Fine. So that's, everybody's happy. And then Pierre takes it a step further and has women as MCs. Now, did you know him well?
Well, not real well, but I mean, he was a leader in the San Francisco Archdiocese, especially in the education area.
Yeah.
And so I knew him that way. And then he was the auxiliary. He'd visit many times. As I was mentioning to you one time, he came to St. John Vianney's as the auxiliary. And at the beginning of Mass, he asked me, are there many Spanish speaking here? And he was doing the confirmation. So at the end of his homily, he spoke about 5 minutes in Spanish. I was just stunned because, I mean, he doesn't have that opportunity to do it very often, but it was very eloquent Spanish.
Yeah, yeah, he is a linguist. Yeah, he really is. Wonderful. So you elected to remain in the Archdiocese because this was the
so
time.
put it this way, had I not moved to San Francisco, I probably would have stayed here. But once I'd moved, it was...
You were doing the work that you loved there.
Yeah,
that makes sense. What did you hear, though, about the new diocese? What, you know, the tom-toms, any kind of impressions in the early years?
Well, like I was mentioning, the role of women was a major factor, and then the outreach to the Hispanic was still very strong, and then, of course, new parishes developed and so on. So I mean, I think it was all very positive in the beginning. I think there was, then when the earthquake happened, I think that became a huge issue financially and so on. And
with the St. Joseph's
College and keeping it up and having to close it.
And Monsignor Mitchell was right in the thick of that.
And then the cathedral, which, you know, is a beautiful, beautiful renovation, but costly and not so useful all the time with the numbers. But, you know, I think it has a very good progressive feel to it. We notice it in San Francisco. And so, I mean, I think that's, so you've been very blessed with good leadership over the years.
And we are
on
blessed,
a number of levels, not just the bishop, but it's clearly the bishop.
Yeah, but our clergy and our lay people. I mean, we have a very well-educated laity. So we are.
Well, I was
blessed.
talking with Sister Ana Maria. They had that program at Santa Clara.
Yes.
Of the lay ministry, which is
the graduate program in pastoral ministry.
Yeah, wonderful.
And some of our clergy went through that as well.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So that's just. You know.
Well, that kind of thing is what we had it for a while in San Francisco, and then it kind of dissolved. So.
Yes. Didn't Dave Pettengill set
Dave had a great program. Yeah.
In 3 counties, as I recall.
Yeah.
Because that is another area where San Jose is blessed, just being one county.
Oh, right, but it's a huge county.
It is huge, but it's compact.
Yes.
You know, depending on traffic, you can cross us in an hour from north to south and east to west.
Nobody can compare with neighboring dioceses. It's a blessing, all right.
Right, it is. Well, we're glad that you're back down in our diocese for
this.
Well,
it's nice to be here all right now. I always have fond memories of San Jose.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing for this interview. It's just wonderful to hear the stories of the early days.
Yes, well, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Can I suggest something?
Sure.
Would you like to talk about Most Holy Redeemer?
Okay.
You were involved there, were you not?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I know there was a book about it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Is there anything you'd like to share about it?
Well, it was also one of the more exciting assignments that I had, with many ups and downs. So when I got there, it was a parish that was going through huge change. So when I grew up, we lived in Mission Dolores, the parish next door. And Most Holy Redeemer was like an enclave of a neighborhood made up of different ethnic groups, mainly Irish, Italian, but a sprinkling of everybody. And the church and the school in particular were kind of a glue that brought a lot of people together, so that people on the same block would know each other and they'd be in and out of each other's houses and watching out for each other's kids and all of that. So then the neighborhood began to change. A lot of gay people moved in. The suburbs opened up. A lot of the young people of the parish moved out to the suburbs. And so the school closed, the convent closed. The bingo, which sustained the school and the convent, continued for many more years because it was a Catholic parish. And then, so the numbers in the area were way down, and the numbers attending the church were way down, and mainly a lot of the old timers. So anyway, when I got there, we had about 3 masses on a Sunday and 1 on a Saturday. So we reduced it to 2. And one of the priests who was into the Latin Mass, I told him to put the Latin Mass on Sunday night, and whoever wants to come can come, but it won't be during the day. So we used the 10 o'clock Mass as the focus, the main liturgy of the day. And I was really blessed. We had a wonderful music minister, and that made a huge difference. And then we would prepare the liturgies, and the liturgy committee would form. They would invite gay people into the committee, and so it became the gays and the grays, and that became kind of the symbol that people know that they could be welcome and so on. So then, as the community grew, we had this planning commission or planning committee, which eventually became the parish council, and it was like 8 of the old timers and 2 gays, and all of the old timers said something has to be done with the parish. I mean, they didn't say what, but they recognized that things had gone down. And so the gays suggested, well, let's have a gay and lesbian task force. So they said, yeah, why not? So this is a very unusual kind of
this is
sodality.
This is pretty radical
Yes,
for those days.
but what they did, they had a dinner one night around Christmas time in the rectory, and maybe 50 people came, and one guy got up reading it from a book about the problems of being a gay man in the church and the tension and so on. And there was this little Italian lady who said, well, I'm a widow and I have the same tensions, and I said, well, I'm a celibate man, I have the same tensions. So it became kind of that issue became kind of a communal issue. It wasn't like such a big issue with anybody anymore. So little by little, the community grew. And then when we had the AIDS epidemic, we began a 40 hours devotion that got a great deal of attention. I was totally surprised. Newspapers came and talked about the 40 hours devotion. And then John Quinn was very supportive. He would come like once a year for dinner and would meet with people. And the theme would be, what should we talk about at the AIDS epidemic 40 hours? So then pretty soon, a couple of days retreat were added. Richard Rohr came a couple times, and it was a very spiritual healing for everybody. And then the convent became a hospice for people with AIDS. We worked with Hospice of San Francisco. So little by little, it began to thrive. But, there was a lot of, when I say the downs, a lot of death, a lot of young people very sick. And we had like a AIDS support group, and there were about 50 men and women, and not only gays, but everybody in the parish would help out, bringing food to people in their homes and taking them to the hospitals and so on. So there was a lot of, I always thought of the phrase of St. Paul, where sin abounds, grace does more abound. So anyway, that was a nice experience. Yeah. But by the time it was over, I was pretty exhausted.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.